They were gods in their own minds, towering over the primitives from the Sol system. For Kalen and his friends, humans were a novelty, a walking joke on the galactic stage. A simple shove in the forgotten maintenance corridors of Kepler's reach was just another laugh, a way to pass the time. They watched the human teenager Ethan stumble and fall against a piece of dead technology, a relic from an age no one remembered. They laughed harder when he cut his hand. But their laughter died in their throats when his blood, a vibrant crimson, trickled into the seams of the ancient metal. Because in that moment, the relic wasn't dead anymore. It awoke, and it sang a song that the galaxy had forgotten, a song that only human blood could unlock, revealing a terrifying truth and a legacy that would bring the galactic order to its knees. Kepler's reach was a monument to tolerance, or so the brochures claimed. A sprawling superstructure of rotating rings and glowing domes, it hung in the blackness of the Link Sagitta void, a neutral ground for the dozen species of the galactic concord. For Ethan Ryder, it was just home, a home where he was acutely aware of his own species' place on the ladder, several rungs from the bottom. Humans were the newcomers, the loud, fragile, emotionally volatile upstarts from a gravity well world. They were clever with mechanics and surprisingly resilient, but in the eyes of beings like the Glicks, they were little more than evolved primates. The Glicks were tall, averaging 8 feet, with chitinous plates over their lean bodies that shimmered with oily iridescence. They moved with a predatory grace that spoke of a species that had never known a rival on their homeworld. Ethan was navigating the maintenance corridors of Deck Gamma, a shortcut to the hydroponics bay where he volunteered. This deep part of the station was a maze of exposed conduits and pressure-sealed hatches humming with the station's deep, rhythmic lifeblood. He preferred it to the polished, crowded thoroughfares of the upper decks, where he was more likely to run into Kalen. Unfortunately, his luck had just run out. Kalen and his 2 cohorts, Rorik and Jinx, blocked the corridor. They were all young Glicks, their chitin, not yet hardened to the dull mat of full adulthood, but they already possessed the casual arrogance of their race. Kalen, son of the Glicks' ambassador Vorlag, was the worst of them. "Look, it's the little primate." Kalen's voice was a series of smooth, deep clicks, translated into flat standard by the device on his neck. "Scurrying through the walls like the vermin it is." Ethan clutched the strap of his datapad and tried to sidle past. "Excuse me, I'm busy." Rorik, broader and duller than Kalen, stepped into his path. "Busy with what, grooming your fur, searching for bananas." The joke was older than humanity's membership in the Concord, but they still found it hilarious. Jinx let out a high-pitched, chittering laugh. "Just let me pass," Ethan said, keeping his eyes on the bulkhead behind them. Showing fear was like bleeding in shark-infested waters. Kalen moved closer, his sheer height and bulk oppressive. He poked Ethan in the chest with a long, 3-jointed finger. It felt like being prodded with a steel rod. "The primate speaks. It wants to pass." "What do you think, Rorik? Should we let the monkey pass?" "I don't know, Kalen. It might throw its feces at us." Another round of chittering laughter. Ethan's face burned with shame and anger. He hated this. He hated the casual cruelty, the way they looked at him, as if he were an exhibit, not a person. He made a mistake then. He met Kalen's gaze. The Glicks' multifaceted eyes, devoid of pupils, seemed to drink the light. "Get out of my way," Ethan snapped, his voice shaking slightly. Kalen's expression, an unreadable mask of chitinous plates, somehow conveyed amusement. "It has spirit. How quaint." He turned to his friends. "I have an idea. Let's see how the low-gravity primate handles a little acceleration." Before Ethan could react, Kalen shoved him. It wasn't a malicious bone-breaking push, but a powerful, contemptuous one. In the station's 0.8 standard gravity, Ethan's feet left the floor. He sailed backward, arms flailing, his datapad clattering away into a corner. He was a puppet with its strings cut, and the Glicks found it hysterical. His trajectory ended against a large, dark object recessed into the corridor wall. It was an ugly, forgotten piece of equipment, a slab of matte black metal covered in geometric etchings that seemed to absorb the light. No one knew what it was. It was part of the station's original core, built by a mysterious, long-vanished race the Concord simply called the Architects. The station had been built around it, and since it was inert, it had been left alone. Ethan hit it hard. The impact knocked the wind out of him, his head cracking against the unyielding surface with a sickening thud. He slid down to the floor, dazed. A sharp pain bloomed in his right hand where he had tried to break his fall. He looked down and saw a gash across his palm, a piece of sharpened, jutting metal on the relic's edge, having sliced it open. "Oh, did the little human break?" Jinx cooed mockingly. Blood shockingly red welled from the cut. It dripped from his fingers, thick droplets floating for a fraction of a second in the low gravity before landing on the surface of the Architect relic. The Glick's laughter stopped. It stopped because the humming of the corridor had changed. A new sound joined the symphony, a low, resonant thrum that seemed to vibrate in their very bones. The geometric patterns on the black slab, once inert, began to glow with a soft, internal cobalt blue light. The light pulsed, mirroring the beat of Ethan's heart. Ethan stared, mesmerized at his own blood. Where it had touched the metal, it wasn't just sitting there. It was being absorbed, drawn into hairline fractures he hadn't seen before. The cobalt light intensified, tracing the intricate patterns across the surface, all originating from the point of contact. What did you do?" Rorik stammered, taking a step back. Kaelin's arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a flicker of something Ethan had never seen in a Glicks before: fear. "It's nothing. A power surge. A malfunction." But it wasn't a malfunction. Ethan could feel it. A strange sensation like a forgotten memory blooming in his mind was washing over him. It wasn't a thought or a sound, but a feeling of recognition. The thrumming intensified, and the air around the relic crackled with energy. A wave of pressure, silent and powerful, expanded from the artifact. Kaelin, Rorik, and Jinx were thrown back, skidding across the deck plates. They scrambled to their feet, their predatory grace replaced by panicked haste. "We were never here," Kaelin hissed, his translator, struggling to keep up with his panicked clicks. "You saw nothing. We saw nothing." They fled, their heavy footsteps echoing down the corridor, leaving Ethan alone with the glowing humming machine. He sat there, cradling his bleeding hand, his head spinning. The cobalt light from the relic bathed him in its ethereal glow. He felt a connection, forming a phantom limb of consciousness reaching from the ancient device into his mind. It wasn't invading, it was asking. A silent, data-rich query echoing in his DNA. And something deep within him, something he never knew existed, was beginning to answer. On Kepler's Reach, a station built on the bones of a forgotten past, a human boy's blood had just knocked on a door that had been locked for 1,000,000 years. And something was finally answering. The silent energy wave that had thrown the Glicks expanded outward, not as a destructive force, but as an inquisitive pulse. It rippled through Deck Gamma, bypassing standard systems, ignoring modern conduits, and instead flowing through the station's oldest, most fundamental structures, the very struts and supports that had been laid down by the Architects. On the command deck, a dozen levels above, alarms blared. Not the shrill, intrusive klaxons for hull breaches or fire, but a deep, sonorous chime that hadn't been heard in the station's 2 centuries of operation. "What is that?" demanded Director Amelia Vance, her sharp grey eyes fixed on the main holographic display. She was a stern woman in her late 50s with a reputation for cutting through political nonsense like a plasma torch through soft steel. "I don't know, Director," replied a harried-looking technician, his fingers flying across his console. "It's an architect alert. I'm not even sure what it means. It's not in any of the standard manuals." The main display, which usually showed a serene rotating schematic of the station, was now overlaid with a new schematic. Ghostly blue lines lit up, tracing a network of energy pathways that no one knew existed, all converging on a single point in the maintenance corridors of Deck Gamma. "I'm detecting a massive multi-spectrum energy signature." The tech said, his voice a mixture of awe and terror. "It's off the charts. Not antimatter, not fusion, not anything we can classify. And it's stable, almost quiescent." "Quiescent?" Vance frowned. "Alarms don't sound for quiescent. Seal Deck Gamma, no one in or out. Get a security team to the source of that signature, full environmental suits. I want to know what we're dealing with. And get me Dr. Aris Thorne, now." Down in the med bay, Ethan was sitting on a bio-bed, a medical droid humming softly as it synthesized a new layer of skin over the gash on his palm. His head ached, but it was nothing compared to the storm brewing behind his eyes. It was like having 1,000 new senses he didn't know how to interpret. The hum of the lights, the whisper of the air recyclers, the faint thrum of the station's fusion core. They weren't just sounds anymore. He could almost see them as flowing streams of data, intricate and beautiful. "Subject Rider, your physical trauma is minimal," the droid chirped. "A mild concussion and a minor laceration. However, your neural activity is anomalous. I recommend a full cognitive scan." "I'm fine," Ethan mumbled, shaking his head to clear it. But he wasn't. When he closed his eyes, he saw the cobalt blue patterns from the relic, not as a memory, but as a live overlay in his mind's eye. He felt connected to what he didn't know. But the feeling was undeniable. His solitude was interrupted by the arrival of Director Vance, and a tall, thin man with a shock of unruly grey hair and eyes that seemed to be constantly analyzing everything around him. Dr. Aris Thorne. He was the station's head of xenoarchaeology, a man whose entire career was dedicated to studying the very architects whose technology had just woken up. Ethan Ryder. Director Vance's voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. Ethan nodded, intimidated. "Tell me exactly what happened in that corridor," she commanded. Ethan hesitated. Ratting out the ambassador's son was a bad idea, but lying to the station director was arguably worse. He settled for a partial truth. "I tripped. I fell against that old machine in the wall. I cut my hand on it." "Doctor," Thorne stepped forward, his gaze intense. "The architect relic, your hand made contact with it." He looked at Ethan's freshly healed palm. "You bled on it." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Ethan admitted quietly. Thorne and Vance exchanged a look. "Ethan," Thorne said, his voice softer than the director's, "that old machine has been dormant for as long as we've known about it. Completely inert. We've hit it with particle beams, scanned it with every sensor we have, and gotten nothing. Today it generated an energy field that was felt across the entire station. The only new variable is you. Your blood." Meanwhile, in the opulent Glix embassy on the station's uppermost ring, Ambassador Vorlag faced his trembling son. "You did what?" Vorlag's voice was a low, dangerous series of clicks. Unlike his son, he rarely used his translator unless dealing with other species finding it demeaning. "It was a joke, Father." Kalen clicked back, his usual arrogance gone. "The human was insignificant. We just pushed him. We didn't know the relic would react." Vorlag paced the room, his long strides silent on the plush carpets. "You were careless. The one place on this station we have been warned to leave undisturbed, the one piece of architect technology that defied our own senses, and you involve yourself with it." He stopped and loomed over his son. "This cannot be traced back to us. The Concord will use any excuse to levy sanctions against our trade routes. Your foolishness will not be the cause of it." "The humans saw us," Rorik chimed in, wringing his hands. "The human's word against ours." Vorlag dismissed. "A he said, she said scenario with a primitive. We will deny everything. You were in the training simulators. All three of you. All day. Is that understood?" The three young Glicks nodded in unison. "Now leave," Vorlag commanded. "I must handle the political damage." As they left, Vorlag accessed his private console, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. He brought up a classified file, one protected by the highest levels of Glicks encryption. It contained their race's most guarded secret fragments of data about the architects, whom they called the progenitors. Data that suggested the progenitors hadn't just vanished. They had been destroyed, and their technology was not to be trifled with. He sent a single coded message to his government. "Asset on Kepler's reach is active. Human catalyst. Immediate intervention may be required." Back in the sealed-off corridor of Deck Gamma, Dr. Thorne was practically vibrating with excitement. His team's sensors were going haywire. "Incredible," he muttered, watching the readouts. "The energy isn't radiating outward anymore. It's cycling inward. It's learning communicating. The base material of the relic is a metastable quantum alloy. It's reconfiguring its own atomic structure in response to—" My God. He looked up from his scanner at the relic, which now glowed with a soft, steady pulse. "It's analyzing the human DNA from the blood sample. It's not just a power source. It's a biokinetic interface. It was designed to be activated by a specific biological key." He turned to the security chief. "Where is the boy, Ethan Ryder?" "In the med bay under observation," the chief replied. "He needs to be brought here," Thorne stated. The chief balked. "So this is an unsecure, unclassified anomaly. Bringing a civilian into a quarantine zone is against every protocol." "Protocol be damned," Thorne snapped, his usual academic calm shattered. "That boy isn't just a civilian anymore. He's the Rosetta Stone to the greatest discovery in galactic history. He didn't just turn the machine on, he's connected to it. Don't you see, the anomaly isn't in this corridor. The anomaly is him." Ethan was moved to a secure observation room adjacent to the quarantined corridor. It was sterile and white, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding in his mind. The whispers were growing louder. They weren't voices, but streams of pure information flowing into his consciousness from the relic. He could feel the station around him, not just as a physical structure, but as a system. He could sense the flow of power from the fusion core, the pressure differentials in the ventilation shafts, the data packets streaming through the station's network. It was overwhelming, like trying to drink from a fire hose. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the data streams were still there, superimposed over the darkness. "Ethan, can you hear me?" Dr. Thorne's voice came through a speaker in the room. Ethan opened his eyes. Thorne was on a large monitor, his face filled with a mixture of clinical curiosity and genuine concern. "I can hear you," Ethan said, his voice hoarse. "And other things." "What other things?" Thorne pressed, leaning closer to his camera. "Try to describe it. Is it sound images?" Everything. Ethan struggled to explain. It's the station. I can feel it. I know the O2 scrubber on deck Beta is running at 97.4% efficiency. I know there's a loose power coupling in the west cargo bay that's causing a 0.02% energy fluctuation. I shouldn't know these things, but I do. Thorne scribbled furiously on a datapad. Fascinating. The artifact appears to be using you as a processing node, a bridge between its own consciousness, for lack of a better word, and the station's systems. It's networking with you. Why me? Ethan asked the question a genuine plea. Why is this happening? That's the trillion-credit question, Thorne mused. We've tried synthesizing your blood from the medical records. We've applied the synthetic samples to the relic. Nothing. We've tried blood from other humans. Nothing. There's something unique about you, about your specific genetic makeup. Or perhaps it's not just your DNA, but your consciousness itself. The first contact established a quantum entanglement. A bond. Ethan thought back to the moment of impact, the feeling of recognition. It hadn't felt alien. It had felt like coming home. He focused, pushing past the torrent of raw data, and tried to reach back toward the source of the connection. He visualized the cobalt blue patterns and felt a response. An image flooded his mind, clear as day. It was a star map, but not one he recognized. Thousands of glowing points of light connected by shimmering lines of travel, a vast and complex network. At its center was a symbol, 3 interlocking circles. And then another image, a world green and blue, lush and vibrant, Earth. But it looked different, younger. The continents were not quite in the right place. The progenitors. Ethan whispered the name, coming to him unbidden. That's what they called themselves. Thorne froze. What? How do you know that name? It showed me. They showed me. Ethan said, his eyes wide. They weren't from this galaxy. They came from somewhere else a long, long time ago. This station, it wasn't built by them. It was found. They repurposed it. This relic, it's not a machine. It's a key and a library. The revelations were coming faster now, the progenitor network feeding him information in carefully controlled bursts, as if testing his ability to comprehend. They were explorers, scientists, artists. He murmured, his gaze distant. They seeded life. They nurtured it. They believed in the infinite potential of biological evolution. While Ethan was communing with the ghosts in the machine, Ambassador Vorlag was making his move. He appeared on Director Vance's main screen, his image towering and imperious. Director Vance, his translated voice boomed. The Glix Imperium has reviewed the preliminary reports on the energy event on your station. We believe this architect device represents a grave and unpredictable threat to galactic stability. Vance met his gaze without flinching. It has been stable for hours, Ambassador. Dr. Thorne believes we are on the verge of a major breakthrough. Dr. Thorne is a sentimental academic, Vorlag countered. This is a matter of security, not science. The device reacted to a human. This makes the human Ethan Ryder a key component of this threat. The Glix Imperium formally requests that you surrender both the device and the human boy to our custody. We have facilities and expertise better suited to containing such a danger. Vance's expression hardened. Kepler's Reach is a sovereign Concord entity, Ambassador. I do not surrender residents, especially a minor, to foreign powers based on unsubstantiated fears. Ethan Ryder is a human citizen under my protection. This is not a request you are in a position to refuse. Director Vorlag said the threat thinly veiled. The safety of this entire sector could be at stake. We are dispatching a security team to assist your own in securing the area. I expect your full cooperation. The transmission ended, leaving Vance in a stunned silence. "He wouldn't dare," she whispered. But she knew he would. The Glicks saw the Concorde's rules as mere suggestions. The threat was relayed to the team in the quarantine zone. Dr. Thorne was outraged. "They can't do this. They don't want to contain it. They want to control it, to weaponize it. Ethan, can you hear me?" In his observation room, Ethan's head snapped up. He'd heard Thorne, but he'd also felt something else through his connection to the station, the heavy magnetic signatures of Glick's shuttle clamps locking onto the docking ring on Deck Gamma, overriding station protocols with ambassadorial-level command codes. He felt the inner airlock door hiss open and sensed the biosignatures of a dozen heavily armed Glick's soldiers entering the corridor. "They're here," Ethan said, his voice tight with fear. "They're coming for me." The progenitor connection flared in his mind, no longer just feeding him information, but offering him tools. He saw the schematic of Deck Gamma, but it was alive. He saw power conduits, atmospheric controls, lockdown systems, gravity plating. He was being offered the station's central nervous system on a platter. He didn't know what he was doing, not really. He was acting on pure instinct, guided by the ancient intelligence now meshed with his own. He focused on the corridor where the Glick's soldiers were advancing. He thought of the word "stop," and the station obeyed. The squad of Glick's commandos moved with disciplined efficiency down the maintenance corridor. Their armor was a matte black, designed to absorb sensor scans, and they carried pulse rifles that could punch through a starship's hull. Their leader, Commander Grawl, scanned the area, his multifaceted eyes seeing in 3 different spectra, simultaneously. "No sign of the human law," Grawl clicked to his team. "The energy source is just ahead. Secure the artifact first, then we locate the boy. Standard containment protocols." They rounded a corner and saw it. The architect relic no longer just a slab of metal, but a pulsating heart of cobalt light bathing the corridor in an otherworldly glow. It was beautiful and menacing. "Hold position," Grawl commanded, raising a hand. "Scan for energy fields." Before his technician could even raise a scanner, the corridor in front of them shimmered. A wall of pure force, transparent and humming with contained power, materialized from floor to ceiling. A station containment field. "What in the void?" the technician gasped. "The station's security grid is activating against us." Grawl tried his comms. "Ambassador Vorlag, we are being met with station resistance. Security fields have been erected." "Impossible," came Vorlag's reply, tinged with fury. "I have command priority. Disable them." "Trying, sir, but we're locked out," the technician shouted. "The core security commands aren't responding. It's like the station itself has revoked our access." From behind them, a heavy metal thud echoed through the corridor. A pressure-sealed blast door had slammed shut, cutting off their retreat. They were trapped. In the observation room, Ethan was breathing heavily, his hands pressed against the cool glass of the window. He could see the trapped Glicks on a security monitor. He had done that. He had just thought about stopping them, and the ancient progenitor systems woven into the fabric of the station had interpreted his intent. It hadn't been violent. It had been precise. Contain, isolate. "Ethan, what did you do?" Dr. Thorne's voice was filled with disbelief and awe. I don't know," Ethan stammered. "I just didn't want them to get here. The station, it listened." "It's more than that," Thorne said, his mind racing. "The Glicks used ambassadorial overrides. That's the highest level of access next to the director's own, for the station's core systems to defy that they must be receiving instructions from a higher authority, an administrator-level authority that hasn't existed since the architects themselves. That's you, Ethan. The relic has made you the station's master." The realization terrified Ethan as much as it empowered him. He wasn't just a scared teenager anymore. He was the gatekeeper to a power that a species like the Glicks would kill for. The Glicks were not pleased. "Blast it down," Commander Grawl ordered. 2 commandos fired their pulse rifles at the containment field. The bolts of incandescent plasma slammed into the barrier, dissipating in brilliant, harmless flashes of light. The field didn't even flicker. "Energy readings are off the scale," the technician reported. "The field is being powered directly from the relic. It's not drawing from the station's main reactor." This changed everything. The relic was not just a key, it was a power source of unimaginable capacity. Ambassador Vorlag's rage was palpable even over the comms. He contacted Director Vance directly. "Your station has taken my soldiers. Captive Director. This is an act of aggression against the Glicks Imperium. Release them at once, or I will file a formal complaint of piracy with the Concord." "My station has done nothing, Ambassador," Vance replied coolly, though her heart was pounding. She was playing a dangerous game, siding with an unknown power and a teenage boy against a major galactic empire. "It appears your security team has triggered an automated defense system in a highly sensitive area. I suggest you recall them before they damage something." She was bluffing, buying time. But what was she buying it for? Ethan, listening in through the station's comms network, knew he couldn't keep the Glicks contained forever. They would find a way through eventually, even if it meant cutting through the hull. He needed to understand why. Why was this happening? Why was the progenitor technology so important that the Glicks would risk a diplomatic incident to seize it? He closed his eyes again, pushing past the station's systems, past the immediate crisis, and reached for the core of the progenitor library. He didn't just ask for data. He asked for the truth. He was not prepared for what he received. It wasn't a file or a text document. It was a deluge of sensory memory, a direct experience from a mind that had been dead for eons. He saw the galaxy not as it was, but as it had been 1,000,000 years ago. He saw the progenitors' beings of light and energy, their forms shifting and ethereal. They traveled between stars as easily as a man walks across a room. They were not gods. They were gardeners. They found barren worlds and sparked the fires of life, leaving behind only the subtle genetic markers of their passing, a breadcrumb trail for their children to one day follow. He saw them arrive in this galaxy, finding the great silent station of Kepler's Reach, already ancient and abandoned, a true mystery. They studied it, revered it, and made it one of their outposts, installing their library, the relic at its heart. Then he saw the Glicks, not as they were now, but as they were then, a young, brutal, spacefaring race, driven by fear and conquest. The progenitors met them not with weapons, but with an open hand, offering knowledge, offering partnership. And then the vision darkened. A new presence entered the galaxy. Something cold, vast, and utterly alien. It wasn't a species or an empire. The progenitors called it the Great Silence, a swarm of self-replicating, energy-consuming nanites that moved like a locust plague through the stars, stripping entire systems of all life and energy, leaving behind nothing but dead rock and absolute silence. The Void Swarm. The progenitors fought, but their nature was to create, not destroy. The silence was relentless anathema to their very existence. They were losing. In their desperation, they turned to the younger races they had been nurturing, including the Glicks, hoping to form a united front. And that's when Ethan saw the betrayal. He saw the Glicks' leadership ancestors of Vorlag and Kalen meeting with an emissary of the Silence. It had no true form, just a shimmering distortion. In space, a being of pure mathematics and hunger. The Glicks, terrified of being consumed, made a deal. They gave the Silence the locations of the progenitor strongholds, their hidden worlds, their deepest secrets. In exchange, the Silence would pass over the Glicks systems, sparing them. Ethan witnessed the end. Progenitor worlds being devoured, stars being snuffed out, beings of light screaming in silence as they were unmade. It was a genocide on a cosmic scale, hidden by history, buried by the shame and fear of its collaborators. The vision ended with a final desperate act. A single progenitor, on Kepler's reach, as the Silence closed in, performed the final encoding. It took the sum of their knowledge, their history, the warning about the Silence, and locked it into the relic. But it needed a key, a failsafe, something the Silence and its collaborators could never replicate. Not a machine, not an energy signature, but a specific evolving strand of DNA. A seed of potential. The progenitor looked out at a star map, at a tiny, insignificant yellow star, in an uncharted spiral arm of the galaxy. It saw a world teeming with primitive life, with bipedal mammals just beginning to master tools. Their chaotic, resilient, fiercely emotional nature was so different from the cold logic of the Silence. They were the ultimate wild card. The progenitor encoded the key into their very being, a latent sequence that would lie dormant for 1,000,000 years, waiting for the day when its children would reach the stars, and one of them, by chance or destiny, would bleed on the lock. It was their final desperate gamble, a legacy entrusted to a species that didn't even know it had been chosen. Ethan gasped, his eyes flying open. The sterile observation room came back into focus. He was trembling, tears streaming down his face from the phantom pain of 1,000,000,000 dying souls. Dr. Thorne was staring at him, alarmed. "Ethan, what did you see?" "A warning." Ethan choked out his voice, raw. "The Glicks. They didn't just want the relic. They want to bury the truth. They're afraid." "Afraid of what?" Ethan looked at the monitor, showing the trapped Glicks soldiers. He then looked at the relic pulsing with ancient power, and he finally understood the terrible galaxy-shattering truth. "They're afraid of what's coming back," he said. "The relic didn't just wake up. It sent a message, a signal. It just told the entire galaxy that the progenitor's failsafe has been activated, and it just told the Great Silence where to find the key." The weight of the revelation settled on Ethan like a physical shroud. The progenitor library wasn't just a record of the past. It was an active beacon, a flare sent up in the cosmic dark, announcing that the heirs to a lost legacy had finally come of age. And like any beacon, it attracted attention from all quarters, both those who might seek an alliance and those who would see it extinguished. The Great Silence, the Void Swarm. Dr. Thorne repeated, his face pale. He was no longer a scientist studying a discovery. He was a historian reading the preface to an apocalypse. It makes a horrifying kind of sense. The gaps in the galactic fossil record the Great Filter theory. It was never a filter. It was an extinction event, a recurring one. "The Glicks know," Ethan said, his voice gaining a hard certainty that surprised them both. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but the progenitor consciousness was a steadying influence, a calm ocean of knowledge beneath the waves of his panic. Their entire society, their military expansion, their obsession with control, it's all built on a foundation of terror. They're terrified the Silence will return, and they're even more terrified that the rest of the galaxy will discover the role they played in the last galactic holocaust. On the command deck, Director Vance was facing a diplomatic firestorm. The Glicks were accusing her of kidnapping. The other Concord ambassadors were demanding answers about the energy surge and the lockdown on Deck Gamma. Her station was the epicenter of a crisis that was escalating by the minute. Her communications officer reported, "We're receiving a priority, one message from Concord High Command." "On screen," Vance ordered. The face of a stern reptilian Xylosian appeared. It was Admiral Zorik, the Supreme Commander of the Concord Defense Fleet. "Director Vance, I have an entire armada of Glix warships on my long-range sensors changing course and accelerating toward your position. They are not broadcasting standard transit codes. Explain yourself." Before Vance could answer, a new alert flashed on the main display. A subspace message broadcast on an open, universal frequency. It was coming from the Architect Relic. It was broadcasting from Ethan. Ethan wasn't consciously controlling it. The library, sensing the imminent threat from the Glix fleet and understanding the need for truth, was acting through him. It bypassed every encryption protocol in the galaxy and sent its message to every ship, every station, every colony world with a receiver. The message began with an image, the progenitor symbol, of 3 interlocking circles. Then came the visions. Not filtered or interpreted, but the raw sensory data that Ethan had experienced. The creation of life, the arrival of the Void Swarm, the desperate battle. The Glix betrayal shown in stark, undeniable clarity. The final act of seeding the key on a primitive Earth. The galaxy went silent. In billions of homes, on the bridges of thousands of starships, beings of every species watched the history of their galaxy being rewritten in a matter of minutes. The myth of the benevolent, mysteriously vanished architects was shattered, replaced by the tragic reality of the progenitors. And the Glix, long regarded as a proud, if arrogant pillar of the Concord, were exposed as collaborators in the greatest atrocity ever committed. On the bridge of the Glix flagship, Imperator's Wrath, Ambassador Vorlag, watched the broadcast, his chitinous face a mask of cold fury. His crew stood frozen at their stations, unable to look at him. Their deepest, most shameful secret was laid bare for all to see. The lie their entire culture was built upon had crumbled. "They will pay for this." Vorlag clicked his voice dangerously low. "The human and that infernal machine. Silence that broadcast. Jam it. Now. We can't, Ambassador." His communications officer replied, his voice trembling. "The signal is everywhere. It's propagating through channels we didn't know existed. It's like the fabric of space-time itself is carrying the message." The gambit had failed. Seizing the relic quietly was no longer an option. Now their only path was to silence the source permanently. "Full speed to Kepler's Reach," Vorlag commanded. "Prepare to engage. We will classify the station as a rogue entity harboring a progenitor superweapon. The human is the weapon's control system. We are acting to preserve galactic peace. That is our story, and we will adhere to it." Back on the station, the trapped Glix commandos were in chaos. Their private comms were flooded with the same broadcast. They were hearing their own history for the first time, a history their leaders had hidden from them for generations. Commander Groll stared at his hands, at the pulse rifle he carried, and felt the weight of 1,000,000 years of shame. His comm chimed. It was Ambassador Vorlag. "Commander, your new objective is to breach containment by any means necessary. Find the human boy and terminate him. He has compromised a puppet of the weapon. There is no other way." Groll looked at the humming containment field, then at the pulsating relic behind it. He looked at the faces of his soldiers, a mixture of shock, anger, and confusion. Terminate an unarmed human child to protect a lie. On the command deck, Director Vance watched the approaching Glix fleet on the tactical display. She had a dozen station-based patrol cutters and a handful of defense platforms. They were a police force, not a military. She was outgunned 100 to 1. "Director," her tactical officer said, his voice grim. "The Glix are hailing us. They demand our unconditional surrender and that we hand over Ethan Ryder." Vance looked at the universal broadcast still playing on a side screen. She saw the truth of the progenitors and the shame of the Glicks. She saw the image of a primitive Earth. She, a human, was a descendant of that last desperate hope. "Open a channel to Ethan Ryder and Dr. Thorne," she said, her voice ringing with newfound resolve. "Patch me through now." Ethan answered his face, appearing on her private monitor. He looked exhausted, but his eyes held a strange, ancient calm. "Ethan." Vance said, her voice formal but sincere. "Your station is about to be attacked by a Glicks armada. They are demanding your surrender. As station director, my duty is to protect the lives of the 50,000 souls aboard this station. But as a human, my duty is less clear." She took a deep breath. "You are connected to the oldest and most powerful system on this station. I need to know. Can you defend us?" Ethan looked away from the camera for a moment, as if listening to someone else in the room. He was communing with the progenitor library, accessing not just its history, but its capabilities. Kepler's Reach wasn't just a repurposed outpost. It was a lifeboat, an ark, and a fortress. He looked back at Vance, and for a second she could have sworn the faintest trace of cobalt light flickered in his eyes. The progenitors did not believe in weapons of aggression. Ethan said, his voice a strange mix of his own youthful tenor and a timeless, resonant wisdom. But they believed fervently in survival. "Yes, Director, we can defend ourselves." The Glicks Armada translated from subspace, with brutal precision, emerging into real space, just outside the Concorde's mandated weapon-free zone around Kepler's Reach. 20 warships, sleek and menacing, their dark hulls bristling with pulse cannons and torpedo tubes, formed a blockade around the station. The Imperator's Wrath Vorlag's flagship took the lead, its massive form eclipsing the distant stars. It was an overwhelming show of force designed to intimidate the station into immediate submission. Aboard Kepler's Reach, panic began to spread. Alarms for imminent attack wailed through the corridors. Civilians scrambled for the designated shelter zones. But on the command deck, a tense calm had settled. Director Vance stood firm, her trust placed entirely in the hands of a teenage boy and the ghost of a long-dead civilization. "Ethan, talk to me," she said into her comm. "What's happening?" "They're preparing to fire." Ethan's voice replied preternaturally calm. "Their lead ship is charging its primary spinal weapon. They're going to try and disable us with a single targeted shot at the command and control center." "Can you stop it?" she asked, her knuckles white as she gripped the command console. "Stopping it isn't the progenitor way," Ethan replied. "They didn't build shields to block. They built them to redirect." As the Glicks flagship unleashed a blinding lance of pure energy, a beam powerful enough to crack a small moon, something extraordinary happened. The station's exterior, the dull, pitted metal of its ancient superstructure, suddenly shimmered. The cobalt-blue geometric patterns that Ethan had first seen on the relic now spread across the entire outer hull of Kepler's Reach, glowing with incandescent power. An invisible field of force shaped like a concave lens materialized in the path of the beam. The Glicks energy lance struck it, not with an explosion, but with a silent, graceful curve. The entire devastating blast was bent, redirected, and sent screaming into the empty void, missing the station completely. A collective gasp went through the command deck. On the bridge of the Imperator's Wrath, there was stunned silence. "Report!" Vorlag bellowed. "Sir!" A trembling officer said. "The station. It deflected the full power of the main cannon. Our sensors show it was a gravimetric distortion field, a technology that is theoretically impossible." Vorlag stared at the glowing station. It no longer looked like a civilian outpost. It looked like a sleeping giant that had just been prodded awake. This was progenitor technology, and it was far beyond anything the Glicks possessed. "All ships," he commanded, his voice tight with fury and a dawning sense of dread. "Fire at will, overwhelm its defenses." A storm of plasma bolts and kinetic projectiles erupted from the Glicks fleet converging on the station, but the shimmering blue field held effortlessly, deflecting or absorbing every shot. Kepler's reach hung in the center of the onslaught, serene and untouched, a bastion of ancient power against a modern, brutish assault. Inside the station, Ethan felt the impacts as gentle nudges against his consciousness. The progenitor system was handling the defense automatically, its primary function to preserve the library and its occupants. But as he monitored the battle, the library fed him a new, terrifying piece of information. The broadcast of their history had done more than just expose the Glicks. The progenitor signal, a unique signature of impossibly high-order energy, had been ringing through subspace for hours, and it had been heard. "Dr. Thorne, Director Vance." Ethan's voice cut through the comms, a new edge of panic in it. The beacon, it wasn't just a message to the galaxy, it was a ping, a way to get a response from anything else the progenitors left behind. "What did it find?" Thorne asked, sensing the shift in Ethan's tone. A new image appeared on the main command screen, overriding the tactical display of the Glicks fleet. It was the star map Ethan had seen before the progenitor network. But now, at the very edge of the galaxy, a new symbol appeared. It wasn't a progenitor icon. It was a crawling, chaotic mass of blackness, a void in the map that was actively expanding. "Oh my God," an astrogation officer whispered. "What is that?" Vance demanded. "It's them," Ethan said, his voice barely a whisper. The great silence, the void swarm. The beacon woke them up, or at least it drew the attention of a scouting fleet. The black mass on the map began to move, a direct line being drawn from it toward the Link Sagitta void, toward them. "ETA," Vance asked, her voice cold as ice. "They are moving through a form of dimensional transit we can't comprehend," the astrogation officer stammered. "They aren't bound by conventional FTL travel. Based on this trajectory, they will be here in less than 1 hour." The Glicks fleet, the imminent threat that had seemed so overwhelming just moments before, suddenly felt insignificant. Ambassador Vorlag, obsessed with burying his past, had led his fleet into the path of the very entity that had haunted his people's nightmares for 1,000,000 years. He was so focused on killing the messenger that he failed to realize the message had also been delivered to the devil. On the bridge of the Imperator's wrath, they saw it too. Long-range sensors screamed alerts as a massive gravimetric anomaly appeared at the edge of the system. It wasn't a fleet of ships arriving. It was space itself, seeming to tear open. From this swirling vortex of non-space emerged a cloud of darkness. It was a swarm of trillions of tiny self-replicating machines, so numerous they blotted out the stars behind them. They had no lights, no viewports, no energy signatures, except the gravitational pull of their collective mass and the terrifying void of their energy-dampening field. The Glicks fleet stopped firing. Every ship from the smallest frigate to Vorlag's flagship hung dead in space, their crews paralyzed by a species-deep, instinctual terror. The boogeyman of their history had just materialized at their doorstep. The void swarm did not communicate. It did not offer terms. It simply descended upon the outermost Glicks warship. The ship's shields flared for a single brilliant second before being overwhelmed. The swarm enveloped the vessel like a tide of black dust. Metal groaned and disintegrated as the nanites broke it down, atom by atom. The ship's reactor went critical, but the resulting explosion was smothered, the energy consumed by the swarm before it could even expand. In less than 10 seconds, the warship was gone, not destroyed, deconstructed, consumed. Panic broke the Glix fleet's paralysis. Ships scattered, firing wildly, their disciplined formation dissolving into a mad scramble for survival. The swarm, fluid and inexorable, split into smaller clouds, each pursuing a vessel, a tide of cosmic death washing over the Glix armada. Ambassador Vorlag watched his life's ambition turning to ash. He had brought his people here to bury their shame, and instead he had led them into the jaws of their ancestral nemesis. A single desperate transmission came from his comm officer. "Sir A message. From Kepler's Reach. It's for you." Vorlag looked at the station, still glowing with its untouchable blue light. What could they possibly want? He nodded. "Put it through." It was the human boy's face on the screen. He looked tired, scared, but resolute. "Ambassador Vorlag," Ethan Ryder said, his voice echoing with the quiet authority of the progenitors. "Your people made a choice 1,000,000 years ago out of fear. You have a chance to make a new one now. The progenitors built a fortress, but they also built a sanctuary. Get what's left of your fleet inside our defensive perimeter. We will shelter you." The offer was unthinkable. To accept sanctuary from the primate he had sought to kill to hide behind the power he had tried to steal. It was the ultimate humiliation. But as another of his ships was silently erased from existence by the swarm, he knew it was also his only hope. Ambassador Vorlag gave the hardest order of his life retreat to the human station. Humiliation was a small price for survival. The surviving Glix ships made a desperate, panicked run for the glowing blue shield as the void swarm consumed their comrades. The progenitor defense operated with impossible precision, opening a gateway just long enough for each fleeing vessel to pass through before snapping shut, vaporizing any pursuing nanites on its impenetrable surface. Within minutes, the 7 remaining Glix ships, including the battered Imperator's Wrath, were safe, but safety was temporary. The swarm enveloped the station, a suffocating sea of black that immediately began to drain the shield's immense power. "It's not an infinite source," Ethan's voice cut through the command deck's tension. "We have hours at best." Despair settled over the Glix survivors, but Ethan Ryder, now the nexus of the progenitor's will, offered a different path. "The shield was only a delay tactic," he announced, his small form commanding the room. "The progenitors left an inheritance. This station has a weapon, but it requires more than one mind to wield it." He looked directly at Director Vance. "It needs the collective consciousness of every human on board. We are the key." Vance gave the order without hesitation. A silent call went out across the station, a message of pure understanding sent to every human. Answering the call, 50,000 minds, a chorus of hope, fear, and fierce determination, linked with the progenitor core through Ethan. An immense surge of power flooded the station's ancient systems. On the outer hull, a weapon of impossible scale unfolded a cannon, designed not to fire matter, but to rewrite reality itself. With the collective will of his species flowing through him, Ethan gave the final command. A silent, spherical wave of energy expanded from the station. It did not explode. It erased. Where the pulse touched the swarm, the nanites were unwritten from existence, their very matter reverting to inert, harmless dust. A vast hole was torn in the darkness, revealing the distant stars once more. The immediate threat was gone, but the war had just begun. The silence was broken. On a forgotten station, humanity had announced its arrival, not as primitives, but as inheritors. They were the galaxy's last and perhaps greatest hope. And so the battle for Kepler's Reach has just begun. The Void Swarm is wounded, but not defeated, and the rest of the galaxy now knows the truth. Humanity, once considered an upstart race, now holds the key to a legacy that could either save everyone or become the focus of a new galactic war. What will the other species do? Will they rally behind the humans, their saviors? Or will they fear this newfound power? What other secrets did the progenitors leave behind? The story of Ethan Ryder and the inheritors of Earth is far from over. If you are captivated by this journey into the unknown and want to find out what happens next in the war against the Great Silence, make sure to hit that like button. Share this story with anyone who loves epic sci-fi and tales of humanity's hidden strength. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you won't miss the next chapter in this cosmic saga. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to you. Thank you for listening.